Welcome to Vintage Weight's PGH podcast. This is Rob, and I am fortunate to have Carlos, otherwise known as Golden Era Bookworm, with me today. How's it going, Carlos?
Yeah, pretty good, man. Pretty good, Rob. So, thanks for having me on. And yeah, I don't really get on many podcasts, but thanks for the invite.
Well, I wanted to speak with you because I've been following you for a while. I'm subscribed on your YouTube channel, Golden Era Bookworm, and then on Instagram, you post some really cool stuff too. And I've learned a lot of just interesting background information and history from watching your YouTube videos. I've listed them as sources on some of my own content that I've produced and things of that nature. So listeners and viewers, if you've ever checked out my sources in the description of my videos, you may have noticed Golden Era Bookworm. And if you're unaware of Golden Era Bookworm, just get out there and follow him. So what I wanted to speak with you primarily about today, Carlos, was your recent involvement with the new Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary on Netflix. So it's a 3-part documentary, and listeners, if you haven't seen it yet, in my humble opinion, it's spectacular. Of course, I'm biased. I mean, anything with Arnold is going to be fun.
Yeah, it
but
is.
I just thought I learned some things. I saw things I already knew, but I also learned some things I didn't know. And in my book, that's a pretty good view. So I gave a little background on you, Carlos, but could you give even more background before we jump into the Arnold doc? Like, how did you get into all of this?
Yeah, well, you can see the library behind me. That's just part of it. But it all starts with, the affinity with bodybuilding, of course. That started kind of, I would say, apparently, my dad tells me that as a kid, and I do remember this, running home from school. I was born in the 70s, and I was watching Lou Ferrigno as the Incredible Hulk on TV. And so I'd come home after school and watch the Incredible Hulk and then start doing most musculars in front of the TV, and stuff like that. And tell my dad, I'm going to be big and strong one day, Somehow they got kind of lost in there because I only rediscovered that feeling after watching Arnold Schwarzenegger as in the Predator film. That was my first real exposure. I mean, I'd seen all the kids at school talking about now we're talking me in my early teens about the Terminator, but being a kid and my parents not being that, being a bit protective, they didn't let me watch that.
Yeah.
First exposure was Predator, and I just remember seeing Arnold's arms. I was like, my God.
I think me too. I think that was my first Arnold film as well.
Yeah, and then I remember because my dad had already given me dumbbells when I was like 10 or 11, and that was already the 80s, so you could say that my bodybuilding journey started in the 80s. But my real fascination really took me to collecting in the 90s. And it started off with, I was at my friend's place. Now I'm like maybe 16. I'm fascinated with Arnold, watching all the Arnold films. Got some weights at home, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing, right? Early 90s. Terminator 2.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. So Terminator 2 just come out and all that. And they're actually sneaking in the bedroom and watching early internet pornos. And I look down, and under his bed there's a magazine from Arnold, right? With Arnold on the cover, and he's flexing, right, with a dumbbell in his hand.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, this is a special on Arnold, and it was one of those muscle and fitness specials, right?
Oh, okay.
I'm like, I said, do you mind if I look at this? He's like, no, go for it. So I start flicking through the mag. I'm flicking through the magazine. I'm like, oh my God, this is Arnold's life story here,
Yeah.
And how he got to America, how he became a movie star. I'm like, man, do you want this mag? And he's like, yeah, it's magazine on Arnold. I'm like, Arnold's big back then, right? Even
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, damn. Do you mind if I take it home and read it at least over the weekend? He's like, no, that's okay. Just bring it back, just bring it back. I'm like, all right. So I decided to not just take it over the weekend, but I went to the library and I photocopied it. And here it is.
There it is. It's your first.
My first ever magazine, and there it is, the Muscle and Fitness on Arnold.
The photocopied version.
And I made a book out of it, like super thick, because it's a magazine, so you can imagine
Yeah.
sticking all the
You bound
pages
it.
together. Yeah, I bound it and everything, right? It's got Arnold's
Oh, wow.
everything on him. It's a full-on 90s mag. I've got the original, of course, now, but
And that was probably on one of those, top loading copy machines. That must have taken you a while.
it took me like a couple of hours to do.
It shows your dedication.
Yeah, and then I made a book out of it. Like it's fully bound and everything. I stuck all the pages together. It took me ages to do, but yeah, that's how it started. And then that's how my fascination with reading about the golden years started too, because although I followed Arnold's programs, the frequency wasn't right, the volume wasn't right. I ended up hurting myself really bad. I actually had I paralyzed my arm by tearing the trapezius muscle.
Okay.
It shut my arm down for 6 months, and I was like, "There's something wrong here," you know.
Yeah.
And I found out Arnold took steroids and everything. I was like, "Hang on, what?" I said, "This can't be all just steroids. It's got to be something more." And I kind of looked online. When were the first steroids created? You know, they're around. They kind of come in the game in the 60s, right? And so I'm like, well, what about the pre-60s, the 50s, the 40s? How did they bodybuild then? And I started finding out about the writings of Stuart McRobert, who wrote Beyond Brawn. Brawn, of course, his original publication, Beyond Brawn, and all the other publications. And I was introduced to the 20 rep squat and the 5x5 by Reg Park and things like that. And I was like, okay, so who are these guys? And what can I learn from them? And that's how this whole thing started. I started building my collection over the years. Now, I mean, you can see that behind me, but that's just my bound collection.
Yeah.
I've got in the living room on one wall, there's a whole bookshelf full of mags, and the garage downstairs is an even larger library. So yeah, it's been decades of I guess me collecting and accumulating all this knowledge, and the channel started by me once being at work, and there was this one guy who we used to talk because he was a big fan of Sly, and I'm a big fan of Arnold. And
classic pairing.
Yeah, classic pairing, right? So he's like, he's showing off his copy of a Sly watch, right? And I'm like, okay, well, you know, show off some Arnold thing. And then once I go, oh, cool, I got this whole new set of Arnold mags. And he's like, you get a whole new collection every week. What are you going to do with it? And I was like, damn you, it's
a good question.
And I was like, I'll show you. You know, and I decided to start a YouTube channel because, well, I saw that there was a lot of new channels. At the time, Louis Marker was big. Nick Strength and Power was there, and a couple of others. But I was a bit frustrated that there wasn't much coverage on the silver and bronze era, a bit on the golden era. Not that the coverage was very good. I didn't think they were doing a good job, especially, I mean, Louis did, I think, a fantastic job covering the 80s and 90s, but I noticed some inaccuracies, you know, not to say anything too bad about Nick, but he was rather inaccurate in some things. And so I decided, you know, let me start a channel based on all this information that really honors that past and covers and uncovers too a lot of people that I guess are not known nowadays, and the real pioneers of the sport. With that came a lot of old school bodybuilders that started contacting me going, you know, you're doing a really good job. And that's how the interviews began.
That's one of my favorite things are your interviews. I love, like, one of the first ones I really just I replayed. I listened a couple times to Robbie Robinson, and yeah, your interviews are great. So I was going to ask that. I mean, what was the balance between being approached and approaching them?
Well, I think the initial one was Don Howarth, and I was contacted by a friend of his who said, you know, I found Don Howarth's number and I spoke to him, and I think you should get in touch with him. I'm like, all right. He gives me the number. I call Don, and Don's just on the phone. Hey man, how you doing? I'm like, holy crap, this is America. And I was
Yeah.
a massive fan of Don.
Yeah.
That's how it started. Then I did a cover on a series on Reg Park, and John Park emailed me.
Mm.
I was like, what? This is John Park. And he's like, you're the most accurate person that knows about my father besides me. How do you find out all this information? We started a collaboration. So he doesn't have many of these mags. So I started scanning a lot of stuff for him, and we started exchanging information. We decided to collaborate, and then things just blew up from there. I mean, then I was interviewing everybody. So by the way, I'm bringing Robbie back. He's back.
Nice.
And
Very cool. Very cool.
yeah.
I thought his in particular, the way he spoke about racial relations and things like that, and how the kind of struggles he had in the gym and then different things in the time and era that he was coming up in bodybuilding was just very interesting, in a perspective, that you wouldn't naturally just know nowadays. So it was, or at least I wouldn't naturally know nowadays. And yeah, it was very interesting interview.
Yeah.
So a similar kind of thing happened with me with some equipment and things, and people saying, oh, well, the inventor of this, you should reach out to him and stuff like that. So it does just snowball. You kind of get rolling with things. So now you're doing these interviews, and you already gave kind of your life in relation to Arnold movies. And we get up to, I saw on your website you're involved with Frank Zane documentary and some others, but then we get up to the Arnold documentary that was recently released on Netflix, the 3-parter. So how does that come about?
Well, shortly after I started the channel, Alex Ardenti from Ardenti Films got in touch with me, and he said, I really like what you're doing. You've got a great collection. Do you mind using some of that collection, scanning some photos for me, and being involved in some of these projects? So no, so I started helping him. And shortly after, Netflix just suddenly contacts me, and they're like, we've seen your playlist on the early years of Arnold. I'm like, okay. And we want to base a series of Arnold's life on your playlist. I'm like, what? This is like freaking Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, and when we sat in a Skype meeting, I can't remember if I recorded. I can't find it anymore. And I should have recorded it. It was so stupid if I haven't. And they basically told me that one of the producers didn't know that she's really young. She didn't know that Arnold was a bodybuilder, and she put it really well. She's like, you ask most people nowadays who Arnold is, and you'll get either they don't know, or they know he was the governor of California, because that was 20 years ago, till about 14 years ago, more or less. And others that more or less your age will remember, that he was a movie star. And very few know that he was a bodybuilder. And she was like, I didn't know he was a bodybuilder, and he was a multi Mr. Universe and Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And, you covered the whole beginning of Arnold, everything from his very first competition to, everything. And we want to know if you can scan some of this stuff and, just help us out in this whole Netflix series. I'm like, sure, And they said, okay, well, you're going to meet the real producer, Craig Repath and the others. And we want you to put out your best of your best that you've got. So we're going to give you a week. You're going to go through your collection and get the best of your best out of Arnold and show us what you got. And so I showed them one of the very first Arnold competition win from a German mag, where he's, I think, it's 1963, so he would be 15. It's the summer of 1963, 15 to 16, and he won Junior Mr. Europe, which most people don't know. And he also came third and fourth in 3 other competitions. And I showed him that, and he's there flexing and all that. Later, of course, he wins Junior Mr. Europe, and decides to just go all out and came second in the universe to Chet Yorton in '66 in the NABA, and everything took off after that. And I showed him the original mags with the original photos, especially the German mags. They were like, "Wow, we've never seen these before." Because, and you understand German? They asked me. So yeah, so they had an advantage here because they're all American.
Yes.
They needed someone within the Germanic countries. I'm in Switzerland, in between Austria and Germany. So right where Arnold was traveling to and from Switzerland to Germany, from Austria to Germany.
Sure.
And they wanted someone that could go to Graz, where Arnold was born, and provide them translation, contacts, videos, everything.
So you're the perfect point of contact. You have this collection, not only this collection, but you're located right where they need you to be.
Yeah.
So everything's coming together.
Yeah, it just came perfectly. And so that's how it started. And I started sending, initially it was going to be just like a help. But their archival researcher, she knew nothing. And I mean nothing about Arnold. She didn't have a single mag, and eventually they fired her. They said, well, she's useless. We don't need her.
I was just going to ask, well, why was she their archival researcher?
They just gave her the job.
I mean, I guess there are people in that profession maybe that she's good at finding the information. Yeah.
She was an archival researcher in other projects, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And I remember her first email was like, I really look forward to working with you and can't wait to start exchanging information. And I was like, all right. And I think I sent her some things and I never heard back from her. That was it. And a month or two in, I'd already sent hundreds of photos and articles and had started making contacts for the people here so that when they came to Austria, they could start getting the licenses for all these photos.
Yeah.
And in Germany. So I knew many of the original photographers and friends of Arnold. So I could already organize all of this. At the end of the day, they said, look, Carlos, this girl, she's done nothing for us. In all, you're doing 100% of the work. Do you want to be the archival researcher for the project? I'm like, holy Christ. I'm like, sure,
Yeah, things are blowing up.
My sign. And it's like, so they gave me the position, the full position. And I worked for a couple of years. It was mostly just,
well, there's a couple little things to unpack there that I think are significant. One of which being the progression, if you will, that at first you're just helping out. You're just, there's not really a paycheck involved. You're just enthusiastic about this. This is what you do. This is what you love. And you're just helping out. And on one hand, you're vulnerable. You could get taken advantage of. On the other hand, you felt safe to do it. And look where it led. So, it went in your favor.
Yeah, it did. I mean, mostly, I don't know if I got taken advantage of or not, but I did get paid for it. But it's not like it was a full-time job. It was, could only ever do it on weekends, and the channel suffered for that reason because I wasn't able to obviously produce as many videos as I was, and that's happened over the last couple of years because I was so invested in this. I mean, at the same time, I'm doing a medical degree, so I can't take time off work at all. And so on weekends, I was really just full on focused on going through my collection and, scanning stuff for them. At times I went to Graz and, I would also, it was just a lot of work.
Yeah. And I know the feeling. I mean, there's an ebb and flow with my videos that, months will go by that I won't have any type of weight restoration project because I'm working on more historical content or vice versa. So yeah, you only have so many hours in a day.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the way it goes. But I think it all comes together and, bigger picture, it's all in the same pursuit. Yeah. So then the other thing that stood out to me was the licensing, that's a piece that gets tricky and complicated. That it's one thing to just have this magazine and say, here you go, guys, this is a wonderful picture of Arnold when he was 15 years old. But it's another thing to try to track down who owns the rights to this picture, because it's not just a YouTuber, it's a major company, Netflix, putting out this documentary. They want to do things correctly.
Yeah.
So what was that piece like in terms of licensing and things?
That was hard. But the advantage again they had was that they knew me. And I know the contacts because I've got all the mags. So they would say, okay, who took this photo? Who took this photo? Do you know them? I said, yes. So I know a contact who knows them. and I can reach out to the families or whatever if they've passed away. And so I did, of course, a lot of the, I acted as a liaison for these people as well. At times I had to just set the meetings up myself because I would be speaking to some guy in German. So yeah, this was the other half of the work, which was actually quite time consuming. I had to call Austria, God knows how many times, because some of these photographers who passed away left their photos in archives, libraries, and pass on the copyrights to certain groups.
I see.
And so I would need to contact
like they in their wills they bequeath them to a certain library, or to like my work is now owned by this library. So then you'd have to contact the library.
And it was I wouldn't say a headache, but it was a lot of work, a lot of work to track a lot of this stuff down. And yeah, especially when it all came to the German stuff. The American stuff is well published, and a lot of the guys that took those photos are still alive. The other half, their families are, so they could reach out to them. But yeah, it was my
Am I correct to assume that there's probably a big divide between when Arnold came over with Weider and beforehand?
Yeah.
Because I mean, once he's over here in the United States with Joe Weider and Weider Publications, I mean, yeah, that's accessible, that's easy. But prior to that, it could be anyone and everyone, and on a small scale, large scale, who knows, as he's coming up through the ranks and as he's building his career.
Well, that's the thing. The initial photos of Arnold were actually taken by the group that he trained with in Austria, all his school friends, and the friends from Athletic Union Graz. So they were owned by the families or those photographers that are still alive, or their sons or whatever. But that's the part that was really focused on in the first series, because you can actually see that in the first half an hour or so, there's a major focus on his time in Austria, right? And they kind of, once he beats Sergio, they just kind of fast forward, because it's all covered in pumping iron anyway, right?
They fast
forward through, they start listing all his initial wins and failures. And then once he wins that first universe, he's still kind of involved here in Europe. And then when he wins the first Olympia against Sergio after losing, it's just really fast forward. He wins. He says it in the end, he got kind of sick of being world champion, God knows, 13, 14, 15 times already.
Yeah, the challenge wasn't there.
Yeah, he says it and he was looking for a new challenge. And they kind of fast forward all that bit because everybody knows that he was a multi winning champion. And but really it's those bits between Austria and America that the producers really wanted to uncover. I guess that's something I haven't said in my own video, but I'm glad you're bringing all that up, because that really was the difficulty in this project. Arnold is all the way in America. You have to understand. He's, turning 76 this year. And the fact that they had me, fortunately, someone young, someone that's currently in this because of my channel, gave them, I guess, that opportunity to have someone with a fresh mind and all the resources to actually bring all this to light. And for that, I'm grateful that I was part of that. So,
yeah, it really, it's interesting to me to hear that background, because personally, I mean, people might feel different and not like that they sort of fast forwarded through that era, but personally, I like that. Like what you were talking about the first series. And listeners, if you don't know, the Arnold documentary, it's simply just titled Arnold, and it's on Netflix, and it's 3 parts, and it's divided between the different eras, if you will, of his life, and which would be bodybuilding, and then as an actor, and then as a politician. And primarily Carlos worked on the bodybuilding section, that series. And I like that because I knew the least about that time in his life. I knew some from watching your videos and from watching other videos and from reading books and things. I knew some of it, but there were little tidbits, little pieces here and there that I didn't know that still just kind of perked my curiosity, if you will, and the photographs, the videos, seeing his childhood home, things like that, I think are worth a watch,
Yeah.
because just the notion, a lot of people think that do know that he was a bodybuilder, that, oh, Joe Weider discovered him, which you could view it that way, but from what perspective discovered him? And that's why it's interesting to see who were his coaches, who were the people in his life, where did he go, where did he live, what did he do?
Yeah, well, that's a misconception, actually. I'm glad you mentioned it. There's a couple of things I want to say. I'll touch on that, and then I'll touch on Arnold's home, because there's a lot you learn by going to his home, which I've done twice now. Weeder didn't discover him. Actually, believe it or not, Bob Hoffman did. A lot of people don't know that. The first actual American cover of Arnold, I believe, is well, it's not even Bob Hoffman's. It's actually Rio H. Blair, who put him on the cover of well, what's it called? It's a red magazine, and I just can't think of the name right now. I think, oh yeah, Tomorrow's Man. Tomorrow's Man.
Tomorrow's Man. Okay.
And it was of Arnold when he lost the 66 universe. And that that month or a few weeks later, Bob Hoffman puts him on the cover of Muscular Development. And John Grimmick, who was apparently at the 66 universe, told Bob Hoffman, look, there's this big Austrian kid, I think he's a sensation. Bob Hoffman shrugged it off. He said, whatever. I'm not going to. Very stupid of Bob.
Yeah.
Ed Schusterich, who was I think a German or Austrian bodybuilder who worked for Weider, was also there and was telling, or was he? I think he either found out about Arnold because he was a scout for Weider in Europe, or he was told about Arnold. I think he was told about Arnold by the people in Munich, and he apparently went then to see Arnold at the 66, and then told Weider, you got to bring this Austrian over. And so Weider kind of went, oh, all right, let's try it out. And when he met him, he realized, this is the future of bodybuilding. And he was, because at the time, Draper was starting to get away from bodybuilding. That's why he moved to Sergio, but apparently, I don't want to say anything bad, but I don't know, the relationship between Sergio and Weider wasn't great. Sergio was a bit of a rebel. Weider was looking for someone that was opportunistic and really with drive and confidence. And Sergio was like, you don't give me the money, I won't hold your protein can, right? Yeah. And so when he found Arnold, young, eager, and driven, he took it. But that's the actual story of how Arnold.
Well, I mean, in addition to just shaping bodybuilding as we know it and dominating it, Arnold was that pitch man that Weider wanted, clearly. I mean, I have plenty behind me here. I don't have the archives you have behind you, but behind me in the bottom of my rack, I have a magazine collection that's growing. And in the older muscle and fitness magazines, I mean, you flip through the pages and there's Arnold with a arm blaster, and there's Arnold with supplements, there's Arnold with everything you can imagine. So it's even clearly he fit the bill of what Weider was looking for.
Even to this day, he's just always promoted bodybuilding. And I was watching a little bit of Pumping Iron today because I'm preparing my interviews with Ken Waller and getting some footage from Ken there, just little snippets. And just again, listening to what Arnold has to say about bodybuilding in the first chance that he ever really could, it just says it all. Like during the 70s, he had many interviews, and of course in the 77 film of Pumping Iron, he had the opportunity to start presenting bodybuilding, and you can really see how he's talking positively about it and really trying to introduce it to the Western world, because as we all know, it was relatively unknown then, and that never changed. That never changed. He's always pushed bodybuilding, so he's definitely one of the best ambassadors ever.
Yeah, and I mean, that plays into the other parts of the series, how he goes into acting, goes into being a politician. He just has that charisma, that thing about him, and the way with words and presence. Yeah. Now, when it comes to working with the documentary, did you have any interaction with Arnold? Did you get to interact at all or anything like that? Because that would be the dream, right?
Well,
That would be.
yes and no. I'll say yes and no. I shouldn't be showing this, but let me show you something. Hang on. I gotta get my whoever's tapping back there. I gotta get that to stop. Just give me.
My children are running around upstairs, so you know.
Just give me a second.
No, take your time, because usually I record at night after my children are in bed, but because of the time difference here between Switzerland and the United States, it is early morning, and I'm drinking my coffee still, and my children are running amok upstairs.
All right, sorry.
No problem.
You can just delete that out.
Yeah, I spoke through the entire thing. I might just leave it
in. Yeah, sorry. So when they were going to shoot the scene with Arnold, with the magazine, I don't know if you remember it.
I do.
Whoops. There's he's holding that blue health and strength mag from the UK with Reg Park on the cover, right? And I was told, Carlos, here it is. You need to bring your magazines to Austria, because we're going to start filming some clips here for the Arnold series. This was back in, I think, around COVID time. And we want you to bring some stuff over. I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can. I'm working and all this. And, they said it's next week. I'm like, Jesus, I have to tell work and everything. And instead I said, no, look, I just can't get away from work. You got to give me way more notice than this. And it really kills me, because Arnold was there, so I wanted to meet him. And I would have gotten to meet him properly, not take his hand for 10 seconds and take a photo. No, he was there. He was at home getting filmed. He was around Graz.
It's heartbreaking.
I know. I could have spent like a week with him, and it just kills me to know that.
Well, that's the way it shakes out sometimes.
But I'll just cover the faces of my kids.
Yeah.
I went to his home. And I'm very good friends with his school friend, Peter, who owns the museum. And I took a photo with Peter and my family, and Arnold did this instead. He signed it.
Very cool.
Signed the photo of me with Peter. And it's not the first time he signed a photo for me. So he knows who I am. Let's put it that way.
But that's such a great memory, like a memento from this time. It's your family, it's his friend.
And it's outside his home. So
outside his home.
Yeah, I've got to put that up here, because that's pretty awesome. So Arnold, in a way, has thanked me in I guess the only way he could, by at least doing that for me, and I really appreciate it. So Arnold, if you're listening, thank you for signing the photo.
I'll tell you what, if Arnold's listening to my podcast, that's a pretty amazing feat itself. But you never know what'll happen. You never know what people will pass on to other people. And I, just like you mentioned, various, just kind of things that shocked you. In the short time I've been doing this, I've been blessed to befriend certain people and get to know certain people that I never would have imagined. And it's almost magical in a way. You don't predict these things are going to happen, but you just kind of follow what you're passionate about and what you like.
Yeah.
And those mementos, I say it often, that in my gym and the collection of weights I have and things, the most valuable ones are not the ones that someone might pay X amount of dollars for. The most valuable ones are the ones with a story, ones that have something behind it. There's a lot of autographed pictures floating around of Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Like this for me.
Exactly. I don't know what this photocopied magazine might be, but that for you personally means the world, because
all this,
as a teenager in that room at your buddy's house, you saw that magazine and
if it wasn't for that,
kicked it off.
I wouldn't be archival researcher for Arnold.
Exactly. So, that was the beginning. That's extraordinary. So when it gets into working on this, that's another, I think, significant thing to point out, is that you just mentioned some of this traces back, we're talking 2020, so 3 years ago. This isn't like okay, I worked on this and now this documentary comes out. So 3 to 4 years ago, this is all being put together. You're working on this. What was the time like? I mean, trying to keep that under wraps, and because such an exciting thing for you. So then how long was it? About 3 years that you had to just kind of keep quiet about this?
Yeah. I was told not to say a damn word.
Oh my goodness. That
On the
must have been
stain of
torture.
death.
Torture.
No,
Oh,
it was torture because I was busting to talk about it, but I wasn't allowed to, Again, going to Graz and everything and taking photos and all that. And I wanted to show people that I'd been at the home, which I wanted to say anyway. But yeah, I had to like just keep all this a secret until I guess all the licensing and all of the hell was, I don't know, all the stuff was done.
yeah.
They had to produce it, and we weren't allowed to say a peep. And that's why the moment that Arnold finally said it on his Instagram a week before, it was actually June, I still remember. I was like, oh my God. I talked to the producers. I'm like, it's coming out. And like, yeah, it's coming out this in 2 weeks. I'm like, Jesus, you got am I allowed to finally post? Unless, yes, go. I'm like, yes, finally.
Yeah. I remember your post. I read it. I was like, oh, this is incredible. I know of this guy. Yeah.
So it was like that. But yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I wanted to talk about Arnold's home. And I think that.
Yeah, please do.
So I've been there twice. Once earlier this year, and actually, twice this year. Once very early this year, and during one of my short holidays, and another one that my wife had given me a present. My birthday present was to actually go to the museum and stay, several days in Graz. And so I'd met Peter that first time because Graz is a really small area, and a very important person had passed away from Arnold's life. And it was we'll just say that. And so I went. Okay. I was invited to go to the funeral because I knew this person, and I went to the funeral. I was one of the first people there, and I was hoping Arnold would turn up, which he didn't. And Peter turns up a little bit later, and this time I didn't know Peter. And Peter found out that there's some Swiss guy here that came to see to pay his respects. So Peter, and he's gone to the museum, they said. So Peter apparently just drops everything and rushes back to the museum. And in walks Peter. I'm like, I know this guy. I just put my hand out. I'm like, I know you. And he's like, you're the Swiss guy. I'm like, yeah. He's like, thank you for coming. I'm Peter Erdl, Arnold's school friend and the curator of this museum. I'm like, I knew you. And so we hit it off. We went to lunch together, and there was Arnold's school friends. And so I was naturally put amongst them, and we're all talking, and they're sharing the most funniest stories of Arnold. And we're just
man.
At the Tal Lake where Arnold used to train, right?
Mm-hmm.
A nice restaurant there. I highly recommend people go. If you go to see the Arnold's home, which is now the Arnold Schwarzenegger Museum, there's a really nice restaurant just at the Tal Lake. It's really good food. And I sat there, admiring the Tal Lake, just imagining Arnold rowing there and then doing his push-ups and chin-ups with his friends. It's just a hell of a time. And so Peter says to me, come back and I'll give you a personal tour from a person that knows this home, that made this museum. Like, oh my God, how can I not?
Great opportunity, yeah.
I went back and I did a little mini documentary with him. And not only did he show me the house, but he showed me the attic and the cellar, everything he could, And he was a great guy. And again, he was sharing all these stories with us and photos and stuff. And so, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that going to Arnold's home, and by the way, you see in the museum the original equipment that Arnold trained with, right? Mm. And this is something really important because when you actually see the movie, if you don't, the first series, the first episode where you see these little kids doing chin-ups, push-ups on the floor, and then there's a teenage Arnold curling and training.
Sure.
That's actually in Arnold's home. And I know because and he's actually using all of Arnold's weights, his actual
That's
weight.
very cool.
That's something for everyone that's watched it and is wondering, maybe. All of that part was filmed in Graz, in Tal, in Arnold's home.
So that was authentic.
That's authentic
Recreation, yeah.
They really wanted to do the best they could. And I mean,
that says a lot.
I'm telling you, they went down to details, and I was going through these details with them. I mean, we really tried to bring the most authentic experience possible so people could really see how Arnold trained and everything he did. And that's and Arnold says it perfectly when he's narrating it, but the imagery you're seeing is genuine. So just so people know, right?
That's extraordinary.
Yeah. And yeah, what I wanted to say is that you get this feeling of when I went to Graz, the first thing I thought to myself was like, oh my God, I can see why Arnold wanted to get out of here. That was the first thing that went through my mind. It's a little city. I mean, it's much bigger now. Really in the middle of nowhere in Austria, in this little corner, the southeast corner of Austria. And sure, it's beautiful. There's Alps and all that stuff there, and forests. But his little town of Tal is like 15 minutes from the main center by car. And it's just this, it's just a bunch of homes with farmland and a lake. There's nothing there. There's no shops. There's absolutely nothing. And you can tell why he just wanted to get out. And anyone that's driven would just want to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, that sounds like a peaceful life and a wonderful life for a lot of people. But in the documentary, in Arnold, he speaks again and again. It's a reoccurring refrain of vision, that he has this vision. So for someone like him, probably stood out to you like, whoa, this is why he wanted to leave.
Yeah, the other thing is his house. Like, it's this old 200 now, maybe 250 years old house, very big. Wow. But, you know, when I'm with Peter there, he's like, you know, Arnold didn't live, this wasn't his whole house. It's only the top floor that was his house. I'm like, what? Oh. He was the kitchen, a really small kitchen. Arnold and Meinhard shared a bedroom, which was also the office of his father. So these guys, I mean, we're talking really restricted space, no privacy, right?
Yeah.
The only bedroom, there's only one bedroom there, and that was shared by his father and his mother. And the toilet was a closet, like literally like a normal size closet with a hole in it.
Wow.
Right? I really learned the you know, just the rudimentary life that Arnold had here. And why the hell he just wanted to get out. Now imagine that, having an abusive father that's just broken from the war, right? It broke Meinhard, and as Arnold says in the series, but you can see why in a person that was more tougher like Arnold, it developed an incredible fire and desire. Just walking in his footsteps and seeing all of that. Even the lake itself was a release for Arnold. It was only just like literally a 5 minute, not even a couple of minute walk from his house. But that's why he was so obsessed with it. It offered him a release from the tyranny he was facing at home and the suppression that he had, right? And you get this feeling like, you know, and there's a little hill there at the lake where they built a chin-up bar. It's between two trees. And there's a sign saying there, this is where Arnold trained. And so everybody that walks past there does chin-ups. So I did my chin-ups too.
That's incredible.
So
I would do it.
There's this area, even though it's not a gym, you can see that, you know, there's no grass there because it's been stepped over a million times by Arnold and God knows who else. And just knowing that that's where Arnold started, right? You start getting this, you can start going through maybe his own feelings and thoughts because you've just been to his house, you've seen how restricted his life was. And I mean, Tal was already a release. Then going to Graz was an even bigger release to the athletic union. And yeah, you know, I've been to Munich as well, which was his first major big city.
Mhm.
And you also go, whoa, when you go to Munich, you know, it's just huge. And yeah, I mean,
Well, it was probably, it's interesting to look at it through the lens of
yeah,
Arnold,
that's what I
the
mean.
difference between this small town,
Yeah.
this little house to,
Yeah.
whoa, look what I'm in now. And they speak about that. I'm hitting my coffee. They speak about that and Arnold speaks about that in the documentary.
Yeah, but having seen those things
Yeah.
myself, this is what I mean. Like, you can understand where that hunger came from. Everyone says that Arnold had dog in him, and he does,
Mhm.
because he was probably beaten like one as a kid. And
Yeah, he had that really,
harsh upbringing. I mean,
harsh, brutal upbringing.
his playground was that bloody ruined castle at the back of his house, across his house. I've seen it. It's
Yes.
a 1,000-year-old ruin, right, with cobwebs and God knows when it's going to fall down. But that's
actually, I paused it. I was watching it alone, and I paused it, and I called my wife, and I was like, "You have to see this! Like, he played at this like castle."
Yeah. It really just goes to show, like, as I said, a lot of people, as I said, people say that he's got this dog in him, and he does. This is why he's been so successful. And me, I can understand in many ways that. And once I interviewed George Helmer,
Mhm.
and he was telling me about Steve Reeves, how he also started off, his father dies when he's really young. He's brought up by his mother. They're going from place to place, at some point starving. And he also developed this hunger, right, Steve Reeves. And eventually the opportunities came for him, and he just starts thinking more, calculating. And George told me, Carlos, when he heard my own story, how I come from Peru, from Lima, but not the center of Lima where the rich people were. I come from 2 hours north on the base of the Andes Mountains, from all, you would call these areas, if you look at them, you would say they're like the Brazilian favelas, right?
Okay.
We're talking tin and cardboard homes, right?
Yeah.
That's what I remember as a kid.
Wow.
And you develop this dog in you, this thing that never dies. You're always hungry, like Arnold always says.
Mhm.
And George said to me, I didn't know that's where you came from, and now I'm in Switzerland now, which is
completely different.
Way different to where I started, right? And he's Steve, just like you, had to go through a lot of difficulties, and George told me, Steve would have liked that from you. And he said to me, Steve believes that you can only truly be successful if you've gone through suffering. And I see that through what I've seen from Arnold's life. And that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to compare myself to him or to Steve Reeves or anything. I'm only giving
it's
a taste of my own experience.
Sure.
And having also seen Arnold's, seen Arnold's start to life, I can understand, having started off also in a very poor and difficult upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand the dog in him, is all I'm saying, and when you see that, and I highly encourage fans to go out and make that pilgrimage, because it is
I would
difficult
love that.
to get to. It is difficult to get to Graz.
Mm-hmm.
But to really understand him and why he has basically had 3 lifetimes in one, and now is almost having a fourth, being this kind of, elder statesman, as he call him, or actor. Now it's 4 lives in one, for God's sake.
Exactly. I was going to say they could probably make another Arnold, because I mean, even just his pet donkey that he has. I mean, there's this whole other kind of persona now.
Yeah, there is.
That he has cultivated that. I mean, my children know that my children, because of me and my pursuits, they know who he was. But if you had to ask one of my children, they'd point out his donkey. They love Lulu and Lulu and whiskey. Lulu and whiskey they love. And
now he's become this. He receives so much from life. Now he just gives. Right? He does the after school programs, Special Olympics for disabled people, the climate change summit in Austria, which I've been invited to. I didn't go this year because of work, but again, another opportunity lost, not meeting Arnold there. And yeah, he just does so much now,
Absolutely.
A lot of people with a very short sight will point fingers and say, yeah, you hear the typical quote, screw your freedom, and misquoting Arnold, I have to say. And
Yeah.
sure, Arnold, I'll say in that regard, I don't agree with either with Arnold's stance on the whole pandemic, let's say. Even though I'm a medical scientist and even worked on COVID itself in my own research, I don't agree with his stance or his stance. Maybe he doesn't agree with himself either now, but during the time he was pushing for that narrative, like many of us were. I was in a way as well. But if you only focus on that, you're missing the big picture, is all I got to say, because Arnold has contributed to life and to our culture for several decades. And to those people, I really feel sorry for them, because if you're that bitter, then yeah, it's not.
Well, there's a lot of people I admire that certain aspects of their life maybe weren't that admirable.
Yeah.
But the bigger picture, as you're saying, is what I admire about them, what I know about them. And if I learn about something, it's up to everyone to kind of decide where they stand on certain issues and where they stand on the ethics of certain things. But the bigger picture in Arnold's case is extraordinary, in my opinion.
Thank you for watching Vintage Weight's PGH. Please support the channel by purchasing apparel through the link in the description or at www.vintageweightspgh.com. Old Weight's new gains and lift history shirts are printed on high quality next level t-shirts, and they are available in multiple sizes and color options. Thank you for supporting the channel.